Hello, everybody, to another podcast of Prestige 2.0. Today, we have a very special guest, Chris Forry, founder of RevitaMax. And with that, I'd like to welcome Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate the invite.
No, it's our pleasure. So let's maybe start at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about the founding of RevitaMax and what your vision was when you first started the company.
Well, I started this 4 years ago. So my wife and I, we had a house in the Keys, and we became Florida Keys, Key Largo. We both became very unhealthy. We drank a lot and we partied good. At one point, I was like 227 pounds, and I was always enamored by the health industry. And my wife became sick, and it turned out that she had a hole in her esophagus and nobody could figure it out. So it made me, at the time, with my former wife, start to do a lot of reading. We were spending a lot of time at doctor's office, even flying to Pittsburgh to try and figure it out. Nobody could figure it out. So I saw that there was a hole in Western medicine. And then I weigh 182 pounds, by the way. 227 is a big gap. So I had a lot of issues. And every time the diagnosis was IBS, Crohn's disease, and I didn't believe any of it. So at the time, I was actually in real estate and construction. I had sold my company, and I had found a gentleman that's been in the business for 38 years in functional medicine. And he took me under his wing as my mentor. So you can't compete with 38 years of experience. So I learned a lot quickly. I kept my mouth shut. God gave us 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. Right? And I'm very neurotic. So when I do something, I don't just do it. I do it 100% full forward. So I started reading a lot. Reading hardcore. Then I found A4M, the Longevity Institute, and I started doing 4 to 5 different lectures a year, spending probably $30,000 to $35,000 a year just to learn, continue to learn more and more. And I've been very blessed with the different people that have, after being with him in our clinic, in his clinic at the time, a lot of different doctors were coming in and I was learning a lot. So then I got to the point where about 2.5 years ago, I decided to go out on my own. Okay. And I started with one doctor. It's a pretty interesting story. He was great at finding business, but he had some issues. Okay. So, but long story short, I was mobile. So I would take my Audi, drive downtown in Miami, and then have my scooter and run around from office to office drawing blood. And then I'd go back, I'd have a centrifuge in my car, spin the blood, I'd have a cooler, a Yeti cooler, put it in, okay, and then take it home and get it to the lab. So that was how I started. And then from there, I was working out of an apartment. And then from there, we finally moved into an office. So I grew very methodically and slowly to the point now where we have over 250, 275 patients on full functional medicine protocols.
Wow.
So basically, to go back to your original question, was I had to learn how to heal my ex-wife, my former wife, and myself, and then it just kind of trickled and snowballed, and we just kept going, and we haven't stopped since.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's awesome.
Tell a little bit about the therapies that you now offer. Well, there's an entire range of therapies offered at RevitaMax, and I think it's important for the audience to understand what they are and what the benefits entail.
So our primary is functional medicine. And for example, our wheelhouse, I would say, is post to perimenopausal women. And then obviously we do a lot of men. But I would say 60% of our patient population is women. And out of that, half or more are post to perimenopausal women. So a lot of functional medicine, a lot of hormone replacement therapy, a lot of peptides. We do everything. Pain management there. We do IV therapy. We do a lot of work with NAD. We have a hyperbaric chamber. We do a little bit of aesthetics with the lasers, but not a lot. We really focus on just simply healing people, which is why I got into this business. And the doctor I'm working with, she's an internist. So it's a good mix because, we work together very well. And she's, more insurance-based with Western medicine, whereas I'm 100% cash-based functional medicine. Yeah, we cover just about everything. Very little aesthetics, but more in the medicine.
In the short time that you've been functional, you've managed to really carve out a niche as a thought leader in this space. And I think it's a testament to just your willingness to learn. Talk a little bit about how the industry as a whole has evolved from when you first began to where it is now, because there's been quite a few changes since then.
Yeah, one of the big ones in Miami, for example, okay, in the last 4 to 5 years, it seems like there's a med spa in every corner now. And there's a lot of people that are primarily doing aesthetics, and because of the onset and popularity of the GLP-1s, meaning semaglutide, which some people understand it as Ozempic, and then tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro. It's a lot of weight loss clinics So they're opening up everywhere. Unfortunately, they really don't know what they're doing. And they're doing a disservice to the patients because, for example, if you give a postmenopausal woman, she can lose weight with a GLP-1, aka Ozempic or Mounjaro. But without estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone, chances are she's most likely going to gain the weight back. So you really have to treat those three hormones to make sure they keep the weight off. And we have women coming in every day. They can't sleep, they have no energy, they have anxiety, they have no libido, they're overweight, which then brings a ton of other issues in, which turns into metabolic syndrome, which is hypertension, okay, lipid panels, aka cholesterol markers that are all high, and then glucose and insulin that are high, and obviously obesity. And we have to correct them all. You can't just correct one because it doesn't work for the body. And that's the biggest mistake that I found in Western medicine. You go to your primary and then they send you to endocrine if there's an issue, or the cardiologist if there's an issue. Okay. And then if your lipids are a little elevated, the cardiologist may give you Repatha, for example, which is going to drop your lipids down to the floor. And we need cholesterol. Cholesterol is brain food. And I see this all the time. Guys will start getting brain fog. I'm talking high performers. Guys that have businesses that have to be on point 100% every day. They get a shot of Repatha and all they have is brain fog. And there's other solutions to fix that. So in functional medicine, we look at the body as a whole, as one. And we cater our protocols to the patient's needs, not what the doctor wants, so to speak. Because in Western medicine, they're concerned about liabilities, insurance returns and so forth. Everything we do, like I said, is cash pay. We sign waivers and we treat. We're not afraid to treat.
Yeah.
We're not as concerned about liability, so to speak. We want to help the patient. We want to heal them.
No, and I like that. Talk a little bit about the intersection between peptides and hormones because there's very few that really understand that link. You see a lot of people talking about hormone replacement, and then you see a lot of people talking about peptides, specifically GLP-1s, where somehow they find a source and all of a sudden they become obesity experts. But there's very few people that understand the intersectionality between hormones and peptides to truly heal, as you talked about, or achieve meaningful outcomes. Can you give a few case studies on how to integrate the two and why that's important?
Okay, so for example, let's just start with postmenopausal women or the woman that goes into peri to postmenopause. So the rule of thumb is once a woman goes with 12 months without getting their menstrual cycle, it's considered to be postmenopausal then, okay? Perimenopause is when you start where you'll miss your cycle 1 or 2 months, then you'll get it again. Then maybe you'll miss it 3 or 4, you might get it again, and then you'll miss it probably 7 or 8. In my opinion, in my experience, what I've seen, once you go 7 or 8 months, the odds of getting your cycle again are very low. So I consider that female in postmenopause. Okay. So we always start, my questions are, what prescriptions are you on? My first question is, how's your sleep? Okay. And they're always the sleep is bad because they're lacking progesterone. So with women, three major hormones: progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. Okay. Dominant female hormone obviously is estrogen. Dominant male hormone is testosterone. Even males have progesterone and estrogen also. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get them sleeping. I get them sleeping, they have more energy. They have more energy, they have less anxiety. By that point, after the progesterone is kicked in and they're sleeping, the cream kicks in because we do a bias cream with testosterone and estradiol, E2 and E3, because estrogen 2, E2, estradiol is the most potent of all three estrogens. Within 2 to 3 weeks, the estrogen kicks in. Now all the hot flushes are alleviated. They're sleeping much better. That combined with the estrogen. Now they're able to put on muscle, keep the weight off. The testosterone is helping also enhance the muscle mass. Okay. And now they become a different person. So that's one. And then we'll add, I have a lot of women that'll come to me. They'll just call me up and say, hey, you were treating my friend. I haven't seen her for 3 months. She has a glow to her skin. It's like she has less wrinkles. That's where the peptides come into play.
Mm.
We have two different types of peptides: growth factor peptides and healing factor peptides. So the growth factor peptides raises our, as you know, our IGF-1, insulin growth factor number 1, which is our own production of growth hormone. With that, skin becomes less wrinkly, more elastic, more elasticity in the skin. Nails become less brittle. Hair grows thicker and faster. Everything gets better. More energy. Okay, once again, better muscle mass, able to keep the weight off. So I get those calls all the time. It normally is 2 to 3 months till you really can see a difference when you're on peptides. Certain peptides kick in a little bit quicker, like especially the healing peptides if you're in pain. Then we're looking at a lot of other stuff with the women. For example, anemia. Okay. We treat anemia. A lot of them, they can't, they may be addicted to Adderall. I run into that all the time. So there's another drug that we work with called monofilament. So we've been using that pretty successfully, getting people that are hooked on Adderall off Adderall. So I like the monofilament. It's actually for narcolepsy. It's a very expensive drug if you don't have health insurance and you go to get it from a pharmacy. But we're very fortunate that we get it at a great price. So that's one for like the postmenopausal woman. And then, for example, men in their 30s or 40s, it's pretty common metabolic syndrome once again. I'll have a guy that's 50 couple years old, 240, 250 pounds. His cholesterol panels are through the roof. He has insulin resistance, and his glucose is high. So we attack everything. And their testosterone is always low. It's interesting because 50 years ago, the average male testosterone score was 1,500.
Wow.
Now, I mean, as you run labs also, I see scores of guys in their 20s. I call them kids because I just turned 50. Okay. So I see these kids right in their 20s and their test scores are like 220, 250.
It's crazy. Yeah.
You know?
Even like the biggest guys, the test will be like 420, 450, and it's like, how are you this big with that low of a testosterone?
Exactly. And my question is, how do you get out of bed? How do you function? So, the scale, goes from 300 to 1200 nanograms per deciliter. Because I like to optimize everything. We don't want to go too high. We don't want to be too low. Okay. Because technically, if you have a score of 325, 350, you have a passing grade, but you're passing with like a D minus. Okay. I want to keep you in the B plus A range. I like 900 to 1000. So 300 to 1500, 900 to 1000 is where I like my patients to be. Now, if the guys are a little bit older, 75 to 80, and I get them, so maybe we'll just keep it at 600 or 700. We don't want to push it, okay? And then where it gets really difficult is when you get the guys that are in their 40s or 30s, for example, and their score is 500 or 525, a natural score. You almost don't want to touch it, but it's difficult to raise it naturally. It's a combination of getting their weight off. We can give them natural stimulators, which is called follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, to raise those with like HCG or clomiphene. And hopefully we can get them up 100 points or so and get them to 650, maybe 700. But once you start taking testosterone, you stop producing.
Yeah.
Okay. So then there's another thing we came up with for men. We call it the motility protocol, which for guys that want to, have a kid, once they're taking testosterone for a while, their sperm count is very low. So now we created that, and I've used it 4 times, and I can proudly say we're 4 for 4. So within a month, each one of those patients had their wife pregnant. We're really proud of that one as a good one, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, men are easy. Women are the ones that the biggest key in this that I found is listening to the patient. You have to ask the questions. You have to care about them. Our initial intakes are anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. It's not, the 5-minute normal time or 10-minute time you may have with your, primary care doctor. We go through a barrage of questions. We do a lot of tests. Our labs are very, very in depth. The markers we pull. Then we have it's called a Sika machine, which does all the body chemistry, weight, BMI. It tells your visceral fat. Which is awesome. That's the fat surrounding our organs. It goes through everything, your muscle mass, percentage where you're at per age and weight. And then we also just got a metabolic tester, the PNOE. It's the one that you put on your mouth and breathe into for 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty awesome. It's a
Yeah.
28-page report. So that gives you a very clear and total picture of what's happening with that patient's body. Between that and then really listening to them is how we come up with our protocols and, diagnose and, so to speak, go from there.
Let's delve deep into that because I think it's important for people to understand how these protocols come about. A patient comes with a particular condition, whether that's fatigue, run some tests, come up with low testosterone. How do you then develop the protocol and how do you assess the success of that protocol?
Well, we develop it based on labs and based on what they're telling us. And then as far as the success of the protocol, I mean, number one, weight doesn't lie and blood doesn't lie. It's very simple. Matter of fact, there's a book about that. It's called Blood Doesn't Lie. We run labs every 90 days and you can see the markers either go up, the good ones, and the bad ones go down. It's just testing, how they feel. We call them every month. I mean, we talk to our patients probably on average at least once a month.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times a month.
How How much do you value the subjective assessment, the symptoms, the perception that I'm feeling better versus the actual blood markers themselves? Because in certain instances, there may be where the blood markers don't tell the full story, the symptoms don't tell the full story. How do you prioritize what to focus on?
You got to you listen to both, but there's also the placebo effect, which I believe is like 22%. You know what? If somebody says they're feeling good and they're feeling great, even if the labs are showing something different, I'm not going to burst their bubble. Because the other thing with this is a lot of psychological, okay?
Yeah.
That's why we come up with the term hypochondriac. I mean, people can think themselves into being sick or think themselves into being healthy. Okay. So let's keep them thinking that they're healthy. Let's stay on that positive track. Let's
Yeah.
get to the next step. Not, as long as they're not thinking they are not, as long as they're not thinking they're not healthy, it's a win.
You as an individual and RevitaMax as a company are probably one of the most unique success stories in how you've able to accomplish what you have. If you had to maybe trace back to those first days, kind of where you were at the weight that you were at, and really living that Southern Florida lifestyle, and not in a positive way,
Yeah.
what sort of behavioral changes really made the biggest difference? Whether that was regular exercise, stop drinking, were there certain things you added or certain things that you eliminated that really kind of became an inflection point?
It was a combination of everything. But the biggest change, the one thing that determines everything, above and beyond everything 1000%, discipline. That's it. Without discipline, we have nothing. It takes discipline to go to the gym 5 or 6 days a week. It takes discipline to go out to dinner with friends and a group of people and not order a drink. It takes discipline to order a filet mignon versus a ribeye steak. Okay? This is all discipline. It takes discipline to go to bed at the same time and get up around roughly the same time every day. So we keep our circadian rhythm on point. Okay? It's everything is discipline. That's the biggest thing. And then once you get into that rhythm, or let's just call it routine, I call it routine, rituals, and habits. Once you're there, it's just a matter of staying there. But it's not overnight to get there. It takes work and effort.
How long did it take you to get to your peak discipline?
I'm still not there. It's a
Yeah,
challenge every day. I don't think we're ever
yeah,
going to be there, because
yeah,
then you get there and then everyone's, sometimes a little bit of complacency kicks in and then you got to go and do it again. For example, David Goggins, a lot of people know who David Goggins is. He gets paid at least 100 grand every time he goes on stage. 4 months out of the year, he's a fire jumper up in British Columbia, I think. And he doesn't, for those 4 months, I mean, for the 100 grand he makes every time he gets on stage, he's not making anything. But he says he does it because it takes him back. It takes his ego down. It takes him back to his roots. And that's what we have to continue to do. And that's difficult.
yeah. That's a very interesting to say. I think diet, behavioral changes, just overall lifestyle are critical in this, and nothing is going to really change unless there is that change element in a person's lifestyle. How do you impart that onto patients that come in? So maybe some new patients are coming in, they're looking for that quick overnight fix. How do you get them to understand that the peptides, the hormones, they'll work, but there has to be a behavioral change that comes with it?
Well, it's really a psychology is what it is. I mean, I think what we do 50% of the time is psychology. Okay. Because if we don't get in their head, we're not going to get the results. And we got to get them out of their own head. So I always tell everybody my goal for myself and my goal for you is how can we just do 1% better a day? Because 1% a day over 30, 60, 90 days, the results are massive changes. So, for example, going back to what I said earlier, if you like a ribeye steak, I'm not going to tell you you can't have it. That's like telling an alcoholic they can't have a drink. What's the first thing they want to do? Get a drink. Okay. You tell an alcoholic, listen, just don't drink hard liquor. Okay. Drink a beer, a light beer. Okay. So I tell the guy that wants the ribeye steak, have a filet mignon. Okay. You still can have steak, just don't have the fatty steak. And we explain that it's not overnight. It's going to take time. You have to make changes, but make small changes. Because if you try to force people into something that is already going to be difficult, realistically, they're going to get frustrated. They're going to quit because they're failing. And then
Yeah.
you lose them. And then they lose themselves. And once again, we're here to help. We want to heal people. And understanding the psychology of a person's brain, how it works, anytime you try and take something away from somebody, they want it more.
So how would you then deal with the patient who doesn't really make the behavioral changes, but isn't quite upfront with that lack of behavioral changes. And I think you and I have both encountered that, particularly when it comes to a lot of these GLP-1s. You have patients that come in, they want the highest dose on the first day, and they're just not willing to make certain behavioral changes. At what point do you kind of have to either call them out on it or just gently let them know that this may not be the right program for them?
I call them out immediately, and patients lie all the time. Because once again, blood doesn't. So I call them out and say, listen, what do you want to do? How committed are you? Do you want to see your kids grow up? I mean, I've got guys that are 350, 375 pounds. I mean, I've broken them down to the point where they cry because I feel horrible for them because I know they are a walking heart attack.
Yeah.
And one time I'll tell you, I had four new intakes one week. Okay, just four new intakes of three men that were between. One guy was 295, one guy was 240, 295, and like 315. And then I had another guy that was his weight was fine. Okay, no problems whatsoever. A week later, he had a heart attack. Okay, how do you explain that? Everything was perfect, but he had a heart attack because he was super stressed at work. And that's what his wife finally told me when they were in the hospital. So the first thing I did was call those three other guys and explain to them what was happening. And I think I kind of scared them because they made major changes. You
Yeah.
got to call people out. You got to tell them. You can't be afraid to say, "Listen, you're a walking heart attack. You're sick. You have issues. You need to make changes. You want to see your kids grow up. You want to be there for your wife. Things like that." Sometimes you have to really juggle somebody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You have it too. We all have those issues. It's
Yeah.
frustrating. And then when they don't want to comply, it's like, ah. And
Yeah.
sometimes they just disappear on their own. You can't save them all. You do your
No, you
best.
can't. And then what about the reluctant patient? The patient who might have heard of the value of peptides and hormones, or might have heard from a friend of a friend who sees you, the benefits he or she is experiencing. What are some of those, I guess I want to say, like, forms of validation that they're looking for to realize that, hey, this is something I really need to explore?
Well, number one, you can't force feed them. Okay. And then number two, in all my years on all the patients that have come through my office, we're 100% referral based, by the way. People don't just show up cold. Okay. So it's because they have a friend or a family member or acquaintance or whatever that's actually doing it and getting results. I think I've had two patients that had not, after they came in and went through the labs for the second time, because the first is their initial, we draw the labs, go through the questionnaire. Second time they come in, we go through the blood work and then rate the protocol. I've had two that did not take a protocol and didn't do anything.
Hmm.
There's nothing you really can do. They're some of the most frustrating ones because of the reluctancy, and you can help them
Yeah.
and they want to do it. And they happen to be an easy fix. And
Yeah.
it's like, I can help you, just do it. You can't do it. It is what
Yeah.
it is.
So, what does the future entail then? Do you see this growing in terms of existing patients doubling down, incorporating this more and more into their lives? Do you see a growing population of patients who may be on the fences now trying this? I'm always trying to balance the macro with the micro, and particularly with the new administrative trends. I personally believe that there's going to be an entire new pool of patients who are willing to try this. But you've been in this space much longer than I have. So I'm just kind of curious to see how the macro changes are going to affect just the overall patient pool coming forward.
I think what's happening is I think the general public is getting more educated as to what's happening in, Western medicine and the world of health. And they realize they're actually using the word, I've been looking for a functional medicine specialist. They're
Hmm.
looking for it now. They want to get healthy. They realize when they go to the doctor, they're just getting a band-aid put on the symptom. And they want to get to the root cause, as that being the definition of functional medicine. Not putting the band-aid on the symptom, but getting to the root cause and fixing that so you don't have the symptoms anymore. Public's getting smarter. The information is out there. It's all on the internet. It's not that hard. I think more and more people are gonna trend to that. The biggest challenge is it's not insurance friendly.
Yeah.
That's our biggest problem. It's cash pay. Our average protocol out the office is probably $500. And that's a lot of meds. And we buy in bulk, so we get very good discounts for doing that. I learned that early on, and I just pass the savings on to the patients. So our pricing is phenomenal, even though we're in Coral Gables, which is kind of like the Beverly Hills of Miami.
Hmm.
We should be charging a whole lot more, but we don't. So we help the best we can. I wish that at some point we could find a way to get insurance to cover more of these items, but I don't foresee it.
Yeah, and I almost feel like insurance companies themselves are under a lot of stress, particularly because of the things that are going on with just the perception of insurance companies and the way the markets are trending away from just traditional payer system.
Well, and the sad thing is, the insurance companies would save money if they were to consider funding functional medicine because it had less sick people in the system,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and I did a lot of research into the financial models of insurance companies. They operate under this metric called per member per month, PMPM.
Right,
And for them, they want patients to have a high utilization of the healthcare system, just to not get admitted to the hospitals, because that's where they lose money. So
right.
it's almost kind of like this bizarre system where they want patients just sick enough, but not too sick. And I think with the growth of other types of care models, people will really start to realize that it's not that insurance companies are defining what is good medicine. It's what's they're defining what's financially best for them, and I think that a lot of patients are trying to come to that realization.
That's a great analysis too. They want them sick enough, but not sick enough to go to the hospital.
Yeah,
And that, yeah, exactly. That's when they really lose the money.
yeah, and I mean you can see like with a lot of these Medicare Advantage plans and things like that, it's all about just outpatient engagements. It's never about how to get them healed, and I think that that was a really interesting find.
Yep.
In the remaining time that we have, I wanted to maybe just talk a little bit about kind of where you envision the regulatory future. I mean, it seems as if there's a different pharmaceutical company in the FDA's ear every day telling them to change this, to change that. And it just seems like there's going to be some regulatory changes in the future that we may not have already foreseen. Can you talk a little bit, maybe for the audience who's not familiar, some of the recent changes that has taken place from the FDA, particularly when it comes to shortage list and the availability of compound medicine, and what you think that portends for the future of our industry?
Well, it's frustrating because nobody really knows. So let's analyze it. So, for example, you've got the FDA and then you've got the medicine companies, the drug companies, which have more money than anyone. Okay. For example, Eli Lilly, the producers of Manjaro, aka Terzipatide, they're $1 trillion company. Do you think they have a little bit of influence with the FDA? Probably, you know. So nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. Right now, Terzipatide is off the short list, which means compounders can know, sorry, 503B, which are, for the audience, we have two types of compounding pharmacies. We're not talking about Walgreens or CVS or Rite Aid. We're talking about pharmacies that make compound medicines. They're the ones that make the Ozempic, the Terzipatide, the peptides, and so forth. 503A are patient specific. B are just office specific. So if I want to order 100 vials of semaglutide right now, I can call a 503B pharmacy. I'm gonna need 100 vials of semaglutide. They'll send it. If I go to a 503A, they're gonna say I can give you 3 vials per patient. I need 34 names, which is a name and a date of birth. That's the difference. So right now, 503Bs are not allowed to compound terzipatide. Although I know a lot of them that still are until they get a cease and desist letter. Okay, they can still compound semaglutide, but that's probably going to come off the short list shortly, and it's going to follow suit, which is going to put us back to only getting it from 503A pharmacies. So no matter what, it's always going to be available. It's just a matter of how are you going to have to get it. And right now, the new regulatory is the only way you can get it from a 503A is if you prove the patient can't take the commercial dosing, dosage, which with Ozempic is the initial month is 0.25 milligrams. So, for example, you'd have to say the patient needs to take 0.21 or 0.25 isn't enough. They need 0.35 because 0.5 is too much.
Yeah.
We just have to write the prescriptions differently. The medicine's going to be there one way or another. It's not going to go
Yeah.
away. It's just
And in
more.
many ways, it actually leads to better medicine because when we can customize the dose for the patients, we can achieve that optimal rate of weight loss, X number of pounds per month, whether that's a 3 to 5 range that's ideal for the patient, without having to get these quantum jumps of low dose, medium dose. We can cater it exactly to what the patient's best needs are to balance the weight loss with the side effect onset.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing now. But it's
Yeah.
frustrating because there's a lot of things that we do differently. What we were doing, like for example, adding two GLP-1s, we'll add BPC-1, which a lot of pharmacies have done before. What does it do? It helps with stomach paralysis. And BPC is a healing peptide, which is awesome. We'll add thymosin alpha, which helps preserve IGF-1. We'll add glycine, which helps preserve muscle mass. We've also, it's funny because we discovered okay, it wakes up a coenzyme that increases leptin. So, as you know, we have ghrelin and leptin. Leptin makes us less hungry. Ghrelin makes us more hungry. So when we wake up leptin, it cuts the hunger. So PT141 is for libido, specifically, really more on the female side versus male side. 80% female normally, 20% male. So here's a peptide to reduce libido, but we discovered it raises,
Yeah.
so we'll do things like that, which now, once the rules change, we really won't be able to do it because all the vials will be patient specific only. So that's a little frustrating from our standpoint. Takes away our creativity.
Yeah. No, it does. What other sorts of frustrations do you foresee in the next few coming months to years, maybe?
I mean, that's really the big one. Other than that, we can still get most of the peptides. There's a lot of online companies selling because they're not regulated. So everything is always going to be available in one shape or form or another. The GLPs are very popular. 1 in every 3 Americans is on a GLP-1 right now.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. That's all.
Yeah.
What's our population? 300 million, 350 million.
Yeah.
So that's 100 plus million people on a GLP-1. And the truth is, it's not a bad thing because right now we have type 3 diabetes. What is type 3 diabetes? Insulin in the brain. Okay. Type 2 diabetes, aka insulin and insulin resistance and elevated glucose, is actually more dangerous than elevated cholesterol panels. Well,
Yeah.
matter of fact, I love metformin. Okay, I take metformin 500 every day. There's been studies done that type 2 diabetics taking metformin every day live longer than non-type 2 diabetics that are not taking metformin every day.
Yeah.
Because metformin is cancer preventative and anti-aging. I'm not anywhere near my glucose and insulin is perfect. I take it every day though for the other two purposes.
Yeah.
I like the GLPs for that reason. And I do think a lot of people should stay on them long term because it's going to help with that type 3 diabetes.
Agreed. In the remaining time that we have, what advice would you give to patients who are interested in exploring this space? Maybe would want to learn a little bit more or kind of get some more secondhand anecdotal evidence on how this can work. Do you have any resources or any paths where you could point them out that they can learn more about this space?
Well, you got to find a good functional medicine doctor or specialist. And the way you're going to know is by the testing that they do. Because normally our regular doctors only pull ABC, which is complete blood cell count, and then CMP, which is our comprehensive metabolic panel. They're not pulling your testosterone. They're not pulling well, let's just call it testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. They're not pulling that. They're not pulling your vitamin D3. They're not pulling ferritin. They're not pulling homocysteine. They're not pulling all the other panels, which gives you the whole picture of the body. So when you find somebody that does the correct testing, okay, and they're giving you more than just 1 or 2 prescriptions or just a GLP, and they know that that they're treating your whole body and they're listening to you.
Yeah.
That's the key. They're listening to everything. Then you got the right person. And that's what you need to find.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. It was always great talking to you.
Pleasure. Ditto.